I want to ask you something. What do you think about the relation between International Monetary Fund and a country like Georgia or a country like Romania in this context, in this international context?
Look, I mean, you know, Georgia has had a long history with the International Monetary Fund, and you know, at a particular time, that was really a very fruitful relationship, especially before the revolution. Many of the early and inconsistent and whatever reforms, but still were really instigated by the IMF and its programs, right? But basically, by 2007, Georgia had completely repaid all IMF obligations and didn't owe one penny to the IMF, right? Now, after the war, we clearly had to reapply for a facility, and you know, we were very pleased with the degree of the responsiveness of the IMF. It took them 3 weeks to approve.
Which was the answer of the fund?
They approved $750 million facility, which was the largest. Again, keep in mind our size, we're small, right? They approved it in 3 weeks, and in August, when everyone was on holiday, after the war. So it was not only the fastest program, but it had no conditions. Our credibility as a fiscally responsible, reformist country by then had been very high already. So basically it was, and this is not me saying, this is the IMF saying, this was the lightest ever program in terms of conditions. That was basically just nothing, just kind of, you know,
no condition.
Continue doing what you have been doing, you know. I mean, so it's overall, it's a, I think, has been a very useful and positive relationship. But you know, I don't want to single the IMF out. I mean, after the war, the international community in general really has been very forthcoming and very generous, right? We got pledges of $4.5 billion, and those pledges actually are being fulfilled. More than half of that money has been dispersed, and even, you know, more will be dispersed this year. And you know, that's something you just never forget, because that's what you call international solidarity, right?
I ask you that because the Romanian government can't manage correct this relation. We think so, and I want to tell us from your experience, your government experience from Georgia. Can you tell us about the correct relation between a country, an East European country, and the International Monetary Fund in this international context?
You know, look, I don't think there's any universal recipes, right? And I wouldn't really probably portray our relationship with the IMF as ideal. But every situation is individual. In our case, I think many of the international institutions think we're so radical and so radically libertarian that they think we're slightly crazy, right? So we're far, far more extreme in our policies than what the usual consensus is. Do you see what I mean, right? I mean, the typical prescriptions, you know, staple prescriptions by the IMF, by the other IFIs, is to respond to the crisis in a counter-cyclical way, right? So you expand your budget deficit, right? We only buy that to a certain extent, and they only buy what we do to a certain extent, right? So it's, at the end of the day, it's always a matter of sovereign choice, right? At the end of the day, it's a matter of sovereign choice what policies you apply. For example, one of the laws that is now slowly making its way through the parliament is something something called the Liberty Act, which is a constitutional law meant to cement all the policy gains that we have made over these years, right? One of the key tenets of that law is to not allow any new taxes or any tax increases without a public referendum, for example, right? Now, there are international policy-making bodies who are not very happy about that, because that reduces the flexibility of the government in difficult times or whatever. From where I sit, you know, it's always inevitably a good thing when the flexibility of a government is reduced, right? Because that's what maximizes freedom, and with freedom comes prosperity and happiness. So, you know, it's no relationship is ever ideal. You know, there's always two views about something.
Is there a dark side of the medal, another part of the medal of this totally freedom, economic freedom?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't describe it as total, right? I mean, there's always more that can be done. There's always more that can be done, right? There's also, you know, a matter of, look, like for example, as a very small but also very open economy, you know, the international inflationary pressures that are building, you know, are affecting us as well, for example, right? So there's things like that that at the end of the day, you know, all translate themselves into the state of well-being of the population. I mean, look, let's not forget, what's remarkable about the Georgian story is the rate of progress we've made out of a hopeless situation. But Georgia by no means is a rich country, or do you see what I mean? It's just a very rapidly developing country, but it, you know, 25% of the population is below the poverty level. In terms of GDP per capita, we are roughly where Bulgaria and Romania were about 5 years ago. But we're closing that gap, right?
And you have a population of 4.5 million people,
right?
A quarter of the Romanian population.
No, but on a per capita basis, I mean, right?
And speaking in figures, in billions of euros or dollars?
Well, the whole economy is about $11 billion, right? On a PPP adjusted basis, per capita, we're talking $5,000 per capita now, right? That's roughly where Bulgaria and Romania had been 96, maybe
97.
Like 97, that kind of stuff. So we're closing the gap, and the rate of change is amazing, but it's still a very poor country. There's a lot to be done, and the most important thing is to, you know, pursuing these policies is like quitting smoking in many ways, right? It requires discipline every day, because every day there's populist pressure, there's media pressure, there's pressure sometimes from international, you know, parties to let the government intervene. You know, why not, you know, make the government bigger? Why not, you know, have a fiscal response or whatever? So it requires enormous discipline to say no, 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 no to all these things and stick to your minimalist, if you will.
I have a question. How do you pay the pensions? Because you said you don't have social taxes.
Out of the general budget. So there's no separate fund or whatever. It's just every year when the general budget is planned, I mean, the number of pensioners is known, the amount of the state pension is known, so it's just a big expenditure line in the general budget.
Because we have problems with this budget for pensions. It's in a huge deficit here.
Well, pension funds or social funds have a tendency to run into deficits, right? If you pay what you can realistically afford, but paid out of the consolidated budget, and it may not be much, and it's not much by any stretch of imagination, but at least it gets funded, right, through the general budget. It's the general obligation of the government. There's no controversy around it. There's no sort of temptation to try and recapitalize the social fund, or what do we do with it, and so on and so forth, right? It's a very unconventional approach. Not many countries in the world do that, but it does work. It's simple. Simplicity is always a friend of transformational economies.
Which are the perspectives of Georgia in this area, very complicated area?
Well, the area is both.
The Black Sea coast.
The area is very complicated, but with respect to one specific neighbor only. However, in every other respect, I mean, you know, our location is really, well, I wouldn't describe it as ideal, but very, very good, right? You know, we are right on the crossroads of the east to west trade routes. We are the transit corridor for the oil and gas out of the Caspian Sea, etc. We are the corridor for all the consumer goods going to many of our neighboring countries around the Black and the Caspian, especially, seas, right? We have a free trade agreement with Turkey and an extremely friendly relationship. Turkey is a $700 billion economy right next door, very integrated.
And it's growing fast.
And it's growing fast, and it's healthy, right? We have, you know, very good relationships and also free trade, you know, nearly free trade with Ukraine. That's another fairly big economy around us, right?
And also with Romania, maybe.
And also with Romania, although I wish there was even more trade than there is, right? It's, I think we trade probably 5 times as much with Ukraine as we trade with Romania, for no good reason. So there's a lot more that can be done. And it's so simple with the ferry, right? So, you know, we have the Middle East. One of the biggest investors in Georgia over the past several years have been the United Arab Emirates and, you know, other Middle Eastern countries, right? 2-hour flight away only, same time zone.
Thank you very much for being here, to be at Adevărul Holding. And we expect a new visit.
Sure, it would be my pleasure. Thank you for having me here.
Mulțumim, a fost o ediție specială, Adevărul. L-am avut pe fostul prim-ministru al Georgiei, Lado Gurgenidze, unul dintre arhitecții reformelor din Georgia. A vorbit despre rezultatele acestor reforme care acolo în Georgia sunt evidente și fac din Georgia una dintre țările care se dezvoltă rapid în acest moment. La revedere!